I'm fortunate because I get to work with three entities primarily. IMPA is the supplier of power to Greenfield Power and Light. Greenfield being the county seat is the largest metropolitan city in Hancock County. Then Greenfield Power and Light distributes that power. Also, Duke Energy is primarily on the west side of our community, nearest the urban area of Indianapolis. And this area is where we're seeing a great deal of manufacturing and warehousing being located. And then the third major player is an REMC by the name of 9-Star. 9-Star is predominantly on the east side of our community. 75% of our land in Hancock County is still zoned agricultural, so we have a large agricultural base, but we do see a lot of growth going on. But I was asked to come down and talk a little bit about my experience from not only an economic development experience, but also from my personal experience, because I live in Greenfield, so IMPA power comes to my house through Greenfield Power and Light. For full disclosure, Duke Energy and 9-Star are both on my board of directors. IMPA is not on my board of directors and supplies us no funding. They do host seminars and provide scholarships to those seminars that are at their location in Carmel, Indiana, that I do attend, and I've attended a couple of them over the past couple of years. I'm only here representing myself to talk about my last couple of years. IMPA is community driven by 59 communities across the state of Indiana. There is also 2 in Illinois and I believe 2 in Ohio that they have picked up. Greenfield Power and Light and IMPA work together very nicely. The base rate that's coming into Greenfield Power and Light is about 6 cents, and then obviously Greenfield Power and Light puts on what they have. We have electronic metering. This was discussed before, and we also have what was really nice, and Jeff was very right and correct about, was the reliability factor. We just were working on a project as a high energy user project, Project Crown, and Project Crown was very concerned, and so they did their own due diligence on the reliability factor. And within Greenfield, our industrial area, on purpose some years ago, we have a very talented superintendent, very forward-thinking local government structure, and they decided to go ahead and dual feed the entire industrial area off of 2 different substations. And this has bumped up our, obviously, reliability factor, because if there's an auto accident or something goes out in one substation, we can back up from the other to that area. And so we leave the excess energy there, and we purposely pay for that so that we can provide nearly, or as nearly as possible, a 100% reliability to the factories in the commercial district, because we know that industry is needing that reliability, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger part. In fact, on Project Crown, one of the things that made our community stand out was that, and that they also did their due diligence on IMPA, but they also talked to some of our largest employers and largest energy users in that industrial area, and they found out that their critical need of that dual power is if the power went out for any appreciable amount of time, just 30 seconds even, they would lose their entire product line, and that product line was running $300,000 worth of product at any time. So it was very, very critical that they were able to do that. So we continue to court that particular client, and hopefully we'll be able to land him. He's in fact going to be in town in June for the final site visit. Hopefully we'll be selected for that site. IMPA has been a good economic development partner. They can't offer an economic development rate like an investor-owned utility like Duke does to try and incentivize people to come into their particular territory. They can put in a special economic development rider, but IMPA does not do that. But we've been very successful. We just announced a couple of new expansions from those same clients in our industrial area. We do our business retention expansion program, and we've been very fortunate to get positive feedback from the cost factor from our commercial clients. And in fact, we're thinking about trying how we can use that as a marketing tool from our current industrial clients, that our energy prices are stable and also very reliable again. Even my own personal and reliability down to the residential level, it has many factors, one of which could be just weather. Do you have an ice storm that's trends further north or south of I-70, can impact the availability. But even over the 2 years of my own personal office and home, we've never had a power outage. So IMPA's been good to us, and so has Greenfield Power and Light. I mentioned that we do electronic metering, which is actually very interesting because they can tell when your house, down to the house level, is out. And also we offer to residential and also our commercial customers on the residential level. You can log on and you can have it texted to you, your phone, when your bill gets to a certain dollar level. They can do this on the commercial side of a certain load or a certain load factor, or they can have that sent directly to a plant manager through an email. So as a consumer, I can watch my own bill, and then I can make my decisions as to whether I'm going to lower my bill or I'm going to turn up or down the air conditioner during the summer, because I get the text that tells me I've hit a certain spot that I've already pre-picked. So it's kind of a neat technology. The IMPA gets mainly most of their power through 3 different sources: coal, nuclear is about 20%, and then another 10% comes from other resources. They own about 20% of a power plant in Illinois that is actually located on a coal field. This is Prairie State, and Prairie State produces about 1,200 meg of power, and they just came on service, and it is currently in our rate. They came onto service about 18 months ago, and they currently comply with all known EPA regulations at this time, and it's considered one of the most technologically advanced power plants, coal-fired power plants, I should say, in the United States. And to expand their portfolio, which they have about $1 billion worth of assets, is they are now doing 3 1 meg solar arrays in 3 communities, and I believe those 3 are Rochester, Frankfort, and Richmond, Indiana. The board of 59 different sites all get a commissioner. So I was talking to our commissioner earlier today on a separate project, and he's also our utility superintendent. And they make the decisions, such as 4 years ago when they decided to go ahead and build or be a part of the building of Prairie State and over in Illinois. They make that together as a board of 59. So it goes back to that local control. We can see the person that represents us on the IMPA board. So we have that person that we can actually talk to and share our concerns with. And you can also attend IMPA board meetings. They're now expanding out into some of the services that they can provide, and we've actually had to use one of them. They're providing engineering services, especially for that Project Crown. Since it was so large, we instead of having to go out and pay a contractor, we were able to use IMPA services on how are we going to service this correctly from the 2 separate substations. They're doing more and more energy efficiency services. They're doing government and relations, doing some lobbying. Obviously, they're working with economic development. And the Prairie State was all part of a price stabilization. Now they're into the long-range planning for power resources, because the interesting thing I found out about IMPA, as I've been working with them and going to seminars and listening to it, is they're trying to think of the next step and what is the next regulation going to be. They're already talking about, yeah, Prairie State is great for right now, but what are we going to do next, and how do we position ourselves and all of the IMPA communities together to be the best supplier that we possibly can. I'd be more than happy to talk about what it's like working with Duke. I don't know what it is from a residential standpoint, what it's like. I do know what it is from a commercial standpoint because we've sited 3 new facilities out in Duke territory within the last 2 years. And when you're sitting down with the engineering staff, the construction staff, in that planning stage, the resources that they've been able to bring has been pretty impressive also. Again, I'm just here to talk about the experiences that I've had with IMPA and from an economic development standpoint, and they've been very, very good, and they've been good to our community too. But it is a partnership. You got to have that partnership between local government and that local power and light, the local linemen. You got to have that to make this a successful partnership, or you just have power that's coming in that doesn't do your community any good.
The difference between industrial users and residential. A lot of utilities separate that out. We don't do that here yet. But I was interested in knowing what your cost would be for a kilowatt hour at Greenfield, if you can, for IMPA, Duke, or RMC. And if you have broke out the cost of users, meaning industrial versus residential.
Yeah, the commercial gets a little sticky because there's a load factor, there's other variables that go into it. Residential is much easier because you can do a 500 kilowatt and 1,000 kilowatt, and yes, and some of these you can find online too. You can Google. The IURC does an annual report with the investor-owned utilities, and IMPA does have a report of all the investor-owned utilities, which is public information you can get, and versus all of the 59 other Indiana utilities. And within Greenfield, out of the 63, because there's 4 investor-owned, to the 59 in Greenfield, we're the 60th out of the 63, so we're the 60th cheapest out of the 63. And this was as of July 1st, 2013 is the date, and their rate is if you used 1,000 kilowatts, your bill would have been $90.18. But remember, that's your all-in rate. That's the any debt service and your linemen and everything else that comes along with it. So it would be about the kilowatt hour is about 6 cents, but then there's 3 cents on top of that. But you can have this sheet if you'd like. But this is residential based. Other than that, you'd have to go directly to IMPA because when we do our factors, they're very nuanced down to each project. The customer or client will give us a particular load rate and load and power factor, and then we back into their numbers from there. And again, Duke could possibly, depending again on the load, offer an economic development rate. That would be a particular period of time, a number of years, number of months, but depending on the load. So that would factor into it also. So on the commercial industrial side, it's harder to define overall. But if you had yourself a load factor and then you went to each one and said, I want to do this, much like you do in residential, on the 1,000 kilowatts, that again you can pull off online, is it's very doable. You could ask them to figure this for yourself.
Are there other states like Indiana that have an IMPA, or is Indiana unique in that regard?
No, there are more than 60 joint action agencies around the country, and many are similar to IMPA. Some joint action agencies exist only to supply power. And in many cases, we call those paper agencies. They just buy power in bulk and distribute it to their members, which are public power utilities. There are a number of joint action agencies, which is what we refer to IMPA as, around the country, and many of those agencies provide other services as well, ancillary services like engineering services, safety training, economic development, rate studies, and provide other resources for their member communities. Because in most cases, you have members of these large agencies that are very small communities that really don't have the resources, full resources that they need to remain competitive. So the joint action agencies pick up the slack in that regard.
A couple other questions that were out there that were asked during the break, and one was on the mutual aid of economic development. If would Logansport money, in other words, in one of these joint action agencies, be taken from the utilities here locally and used in other communities, or would what's generated in Logansport stay in Logansport for economic development? It's an IMPA question.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if you take the, obviously, if you're paying an IMPA bill, or your power people are paying an IMPA bill, and if you don't utilize their services in some manner, for the amount of money that goes out, I guess you'd be on the losing end. I don't know what their economic development budget is from IMPA, nor do I know if they define it out. We're pretty aggressive on trying to utilize them as much as possible. So from an economic development standpoint and their resources, but the resources we've been able to use, again, have been training seminars that are done as economically feasible, where they've been able to invite mayors and council members and economic development people onto one room, and they may have 200-300 people from their in total from all of their 59 Indiana residents, and then a buffet lunch. So they do it very, very cost effectively. So if you didn't utilize it and didn't attend them, you'd probably be on the short side.
Somebody else had a question following up to Mr. Haas's statement about distribution. If Logansport became a generating plant again after they had a membership in IMPA, are there other cities out there that are APPA members like that are both distributors and generators?
Yes. I guess if I want to understand the question correctly. So all of the public power utilities that belong to APPA, or we consider municipal electric systems, own their distribution systems. As I mentioned previously, only a third of all public power utilities actually have any generation assets, and many of that 1/3 population may just have peaking units that are diesel generators that are just started when you hit your peak and energy costs the most. You try to reduce your exposure on the market by running those diesel generators, or if there is an emergency such as an ice storm or something like that, and your community is disconnected from the grid, you can generate electricity using those what we refer to as RICE units, or just reciprocal internal combustion engine units, diesel units. Most of those 1/3 utilities fit into that category. And then there's the larger utilities that have generation assets, coal, nuclear, and natural gas, or hydro in that mix as well. So I guess to answer that question the way I thought it was asked, is that yes, we do have a number of members that do generate electricity or own power plants. We have a lot more members that do not.
Could one of the members of CARE or maybe one of the members of our panel please summarize, if I walk out the door this evening and I am approached by someone who says, what was that meeting about? What would be a way to summarize what's being proposed, or maybe the elevator speech of the evening? What would that be?
I think each of the members of the panel speak for themselves, but in the elevator that I'm in as one of the proponents of this event and the event about a year ago related to the incineration project, is that in the history of Logansport, we are part of the Public Power Association history that Jeff Haas summarized, and the idea would be, before our community makes a significant policy change in the direction that a number of elected officials speak, which is in favor of investor-owned utility as far as generation, before that decision be made to go with some large corporation as the generator. Pyrolyzer was the first model. There's newer models being generally referenced. Consider the choice, if you go with an investor-owned utility for profit, consider our history and by comparison the advantages that you would be choosing to no longer have, which is being a public power. That's my elevator speech. Here's a hand.
Yeah, Joe Buck, I do have to be on the city council. My question is, what does it cost to join IMPA? And do we have to buy into this Prairie coal plant in Illinois as part of our membership cost or whatever? And also, what happens to our jobs at LMU? If they close the power plant, we lose 35 jobs.
Skip, could you take a shot at that initially?
I would have no idea. I don't work for IMPA. I've not discussed Logansport with IMPA. I mean, that would be the discussion you could have directly with them and discuss that with them. I'd have no idea.
The service board made a gesture about a year ago to ask IMPA for a proposal. And Joe, I think those would be the types of questions that would be discussed on that occasion. That's a
Question down here.
Mr. Bontrager, you spoke earlier today about the fact that our grid may be reaching a capacity, that is, an ultimate capacity. Now, how long are you saying that this is going to occur? And as a second question, has anything been done to do something about the fact that we're reaching capacity that the grid allows?
I don't really have exact numbers. I know back when the economy, which makes a big difference on our capacity because of the amount of usage of energy, that was back in 2007-8, they were saying 5 to 10 years before a major rebuild. There have been a lot of things done with power lines coming through the area, even through here, starting with the ultimate delivery of power from the sources, but the local distribution has not really been upgraded. So at this time, it depends a lot on the economy and how the energy usage goes. I don't know I have exact numbers on that, but I would guess probably still at least 5 to 15 year range.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I mean, I think I have a bit of a different perspective. I don't have those numbers, but I mean, I think I generally believe, again, full disclosure, I'm not an engineer. We have individuals on our staff that are a lot more technical than I am, but I do not think that we are in a situation here domestically where we have reached capacity with regards to transmission. I mean, I do think that there are certain corridors within this country whereby we're going to need to expand transmission, but I think a more immediate concern for us is probably how we're going to backfill like I said previously, up to 70 gigawatts of capacity if the EPA regulations cause a premature retirement of up to 70 gigawatts of fossil fuel, primarily coal plants. I think that would have a more material impact in the short term in that 5-10 year time frame on electricity supply than the ability to transmit electrons today. But then again, I'm not, I don't have the numbers specifically, so I don't want to presuppose anything.
I'm Sarah Walthery. I have a question for Mr. Bontrager. You talked very strongly about solar power, and I was just wondering if you could give us some companies or persons that we could go to locally for information about the solar power available here, and what would be the first step that one would take to get started with solar?
Well, probably the best, closest advocate for solar in the area is going to be Joe Scheitler, sitting right up here on my left. Spring Creek Nursery or Landscaping, he has a system that we installed. We consider ourselves somewhat local. There were, I don't know if there's other companies, there was one in Kokomo, I don't think they're doing it anymore. But we have a website. Joe can tell you better from a non-salesman point of view his experience with his system. There are several small systems here in town we did for the YMCA, but they're fairly small. So I would say Joe would be happy to talk to you, I think, about solar, and we would too, so feel free to contact either one of us.
Marty?
Marty Monahan. I'm on the LMU Service Board. First, I have a comment for Mr. Bontrager, and just to kind of set the facts straight, that early in your presentation, you said that Indiana does not have a high quality of coal, and most of the coal comes from West Virginia or whatever. But I would like to point out that LMU uses Indiana coal. It's probably the highest grade of coal that you can get. It's basically stoker coal, and it comes from Peabody coal, but it does come from Indiana. But my question, Skip, on the power plant in Illinois, was that a public project or a private project? How was that funded?
That was done 4 years before I got down there. I'm sure that information is available through IMPA or on the website of how it was put together. From what I understand, and yeah, you'd have to correct me and look for sure, that this was in a partnership of other utilities, but I don't want to say for sure because I just don't know. I wasn't there, so I don't know the exact history of the financing. I apologize.
And the other question was, of all of the power sold by IMPA in, let's just say, the state of Indiana, how much of that power is actually generated by IMPA?
IMPA does, other than the 20% that stake that they have in utilizing of Prairie State, I think they're still using some of the generation powers from some of the municipal utilities that they've taken for peaking power.
So basically, they broker the power
yeah,
from
they broker the
others.
power, that kind of stuff. But
okay.
I don't have the exact figure. Again, IMPA would be the one to
And I appreciate that correction. That was my understanding from the Coles, so if that's wrong, thanks for the correction.
One of the questions that came up back here earlier about Duke Energy, why don't more of the 59 or 72 public utilities in Indiana buy their power from Duke Energy? If Logansport and Hagerstown are the only utilities that do that, why is that?
That's to me, I don't know.
If you know, or Jeff might know that answer. I don't know.
I mean, again, it's a local decision, and it is that decision is determined, in the best interest of each community. I think that what works for Crawfordsville or Peru or any number of other municipal utilities in the state of Indiana may not work for Logansport. I mean, that is a decision that you as a community need to reach, and that's probably what motivates those numbers, I would imagine. In what sense, sir?
How about a microphone?
I believe it was in 1982, the state of Indiana had all the utilities draw their boundaries, make agreements with the adjacent utilities, such that we cannot sell power here at Logansport to Peru and they to us or any place else. NIPSCO can't sell power to here. It was made back then, perhaps since that time, I don't know because I wasn't involved, that the borders have been changed, but very specific borders were made. Now, as far as the Indiana Municipal Power Agency, maybe the folks here don't remember. Logansport was one of the 7 originators of IMPA back in 1976. And then in about 1981, when IMPA was finally getting underway, we had a financial consultant for the utilities who refused to allow the president of IMPA to even speak to the board, the Utility Service Board, to indicate here's what you need to do in order to now be a final member. And the financial consultant said, it's either me or them. And we were in the middle of a $13 million project that would bring good power, a 230,000 volt line from Walton up to the utilities here, put in a substation that would bring it to the 69, finish the 69,000 volt line around town, put in 3 new substations. And that brought us the power. Why did we have to do that? Because we had a power outage of 18 hours that closed down the whole town during a very hot summer day. IMPA said, here are the regulations we're going to have to do, and everyone's going to have to join. There were 4 generating stations at that time, Richmond, Peru, Logansport, Frankfurt. Frankfurt shut down. And in the end, Logansport said, well, we need our financial consultant, so we're not going to join IMPA. We could have been one of the original members and benefited from that, on one hand. On the other hand, we had subsequently a very good controller and then utilities manager in Klaus Hemberger, who brought the utility from having shoeboxes full of bills and local people who said they would not give any materials to Logansport unless they had cash on the barrelhead. That's what Klaus got into when he came in 1978. So the history of the utilities is very broad, and I'm surprised that Skip isn't aware of all of this, since he's been involved with it here. And we have an excellent utility. Now the question is Logansport a good place to be for the young people? Or is it a good place to be from? And unless we get a good, substantial power and industrial base, it's going to remain a good place to be from. I've got 6 children who grew up and graduated from Logansport High School now. The youngest is 49, so none of them live here. One of the reasons, Logansport is a good place to be from. So whoever is in control of making sure that we get good power, good industrial base, and regulations that will cover the things that are necessary for the town to grow, and we're going to be losing our young people because we already have.
Because of your review of history, please identify yourself.
I don't know if it's necessary.
Well, I think it's important.
Steve Kovacs.
Steve Kovacs. Thank you, Mr. Kovacs.
Question that we had for Skip back here was the payment in lieu of taxes that Mr. Haas talked about, and you've had a chance to look at this now from the Logansport side of things and how the budget tapped the Logansport municipal utilities to pay for salaries, even the council salary that you received. How does that compare in Greenfield with what IMPA provides Greenfield for a payment in lieu of taxes?
I don't believe, again, I haven't reviewed the city budget, but I don't believe IMPA pays a pilot tax. I believe the Greenfield utility has some payment to the general fund, but I don't believe IMPA does. But again, I'd have to go back and get the city budget to answer that question correctly.
I have a related question, and I don't know, Jeff, if this is part of your APPA work, but as I prepared for this evening, I saw that the APPA has done a study of investor-owned utilities' payment of income taxes, property taxes in their communities compared to the payment in lieu by municipally owned utilities. Would you, if you're acquainted with that study, would you please share that with my friends here?
Yeah, so APPA conducts a study every 2 years on the transfer, payment in lieu of taxes or transfer to general funds. And what we do is we compare what our member utilities, public power utilities, are contributing by way of contributions, by way of payment in lieu of taxes, or in-kind contributions, things like hanging Christmas lights up on Main Street. There is a cost to that. Utilities can account for those costs in this factor. But when you compare what public power is paying with regards to the transfer to the general fund relative to what investor-owned utilities are paying in terms of taxes, public power generates more revenue by more than a percentage point than investor-owned utilities for the communities they serve.
Any more hand raisings? It's almost time to eat supper, I know that. Actually, I had, if I can have your grace, as I was talking to both Skip Cooker and Jeff Haas, preparing for this evening, independent of each other, they referred to a concept of due diligence, and they applied it to local officials looking at questions like we're going through. And if you would, independent of each other, share with my fellow community members this concept of due diligence. And you both used it as it was like part of a standard fundamental vocabulary. So please teach a little on that.
Well, it was during that conversation earlier. I was from the standpoint that because of our Project Crown and their due diligence of Greenfield Power Light and IMPA, due to the fact that power is such a critical aspect of their commercial need, that I learned through their due diligence a great deal about IMPA and Greenfield Power Light at the same time. because of the questions that they had, and it was from a business aspect that it was interesting to see their maturations of how they went through it step by step. Is that in trying to use it as a site location tool? Was this site better than a potential site that we were courting them on in Duke territory? So it was an interesting kind of a look at both areas to make their decision, let alone against other communities. This was within one community, but two separate electric utilities. So that's how we were doing it.
Well, in regards to due diligence, what I would say is that it's generally a good thing, not only with regards to the electric utility, but any business proposition that you encounter. And with regards to public power, one of the unique aspects of the industry is that there are laws governing how information is shared and made available. Sunshine laws certainly apply to the process that governs most decisions that are reached. I would say that in my experience, most of the individuals that run utilities like Logansport are from the communities they serve, or very much like the communities that they're serving, and they have a vested interest in seeing the community succeed. There usually are no ulterior motives with regards to how they perceive their community. Now, in terms of, I can't speak what is transpiring locally. I mean, I have access to the internet, and I certainly read about what some of the decisions that you're looking at in the future. But I don't have the historical perspective that you all have here. But I do think that having sessions like this and asking questions and seeking information is a very healthy thing. And that is what makes one of the things that makes public power unique. And I think that all of you, are vested in your community, and it's certainly, it's heartfelt and it's sincere. And I just encourage you to do more of that. And I think ultimately, I would like to think that everyone is working for the good of the community and trying to achieve the best results for the right reasons.